Good afternoon. I have a topic, and I disclaimer, I did not choose the topic. Marriage, an ideal or an illusion. Didn't choose it, but it's an interesting topic. I'll tell you why it's an interesting topic. We always promote marriage as a church. We don't talk as much about the ones that fail. We talk about the ones that should succeed. And that's the more obvious part, and that's the part that we don't always talk about either. The fact that you may want it, but doesn't always come. Is marriage an ideal or an illusion? When God created human beings, He created us and gave us marriage as one of those gifts that were supposed to be great. And when we first see marriage in the Bible, it's in a perfect environment. There is no sin. There is an equal number of men and women, 1-1. And so we see it work, and God has great plans for human beings. He wants them to fill the earth and subdue it. He wants human beings to have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, over the cattle, and over every moving thing that is on the earth. That's God's plan. And for them to be able to achieve that, He gives them this marriage. And so when God tells them to do this, He's saying this to this couple: be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, birds of the air, over the cattle, over the earth, and over everything that moves. This is what He says to them as a couple. In other words, when God wanted them to go and conquer the world, the best team He put together was this couple. So it was meant to do great things. So marriage has this tremendous potential, and we promote it because it's part of God's idea. Then sin comes into the world. When sin comes into the world, things change. Now we have another priority. And this other priority is to make it to the kingdom. We have to survive a world that has got sin and make it to the kingdom and continue with the project. And when we live in a sinful world, you've got selfish people. Naturally, we are selfish. Men, women, we are selfish because we have sinful hearts. And sinful hearts always want the best for myself. And that's basically what we have today. Now, when we talk about marriage, we talk about marriage on two fronts. One, the ideal of God when He created human beings. When marriage works, it works very well. Talk to people who've been successfully married for a long time. Did you see that I did not use the word happily married? I said successfully. Do you know why I say successfully married over against happily married? The happy part is seasonal. Seasonal. What do I mean by seasonal? There are seasons when it's there, there are seasons when it's not there. But the same way you don't kill yourself when winter comes, you wait for summer. People who are successfully married know that when winter comes, it's going to pass. It's going to what? It's going to pass, and then there's going to be spring, and then there's going to be summer, and then they see traces of autumn, and they hang in there, successfully married. And then successfully married people have memories, and they'll have photographs and tell you stories of spring and summer. Tell you stories of what? Spring and summer. But then they know that when autumn comes and then there's winter. They don't talk too much about winter. You know, they can give hints about autumn but not winter. Now, the result is that we read about the ideal in the Bible, which is God's intention. And whenever the Bible is full of ideas and principles that are going to help us get very close to God's ideal. But when we deal with people around us, we see successful marriages. People who are successfully married. And because whenever they talk, it's usually stories of spring and summer. We expect our marriages to be just what? Spring and summer, with traces of autumn, but spring and summer. Then you get into yours and you experience your autumn and it feels very cold. Now let me explain this. The story of autumn that's very cold. My wife and I went to, we took a bus trip. The bus trip was because we had left the kids at home and we thought we were going to do this as if we were young. So we took a bus trip across Europe. Now, we were traveling, we took a bus from Germany going to Denmark. Now, it was in autumn. So it's not supposed to be cold, because we landed in Frankfurt, Germany. It was warm-ish with some traces. But when we were crossing, we had to cross the Black Sea from Germany into Denmark. It was freezing. It was what? But it's autumn. Freezing. We were going to Copenhagen. It was freezing. And we couldn't believe it. We had to buy gloves. That's how cold it was. And the people there were saying, hey, it's still going to get cold. It's going to what? And we're like, no. If it's still going to, we don't want to live here. It was autumn. Now sometimes we get married and we experience that kind of autumn. And you're like, if it's still going to be winter, this is not what I signed up for. You hit the road. But then, spring and summer come. So we do have the ideal that we promote as a church. We do, because it's in the scripture and we know God can help us have successful marriages. But there is the part of marriage that does appear to be an illusion. And the reason why it appears to be an illusion is because, first of all, not every woman that wants to get married will get married. Almost every man who wants to get married will get married. I'm going to explain it, but let me say this again. Not every woman who wants to get married will get married. But almost every man who wants to get married will get married. Do you know why? The first one is numbers. Just numbers, simple story of numbers. Just look around. There are usually more women than men. Of course, more boys are born than girls. But more boys die in infancy than girls. And as we grow up, more boys die from funny things, being hit by cars, drowning. Girls don't usually die from drowning and stuff like that. Boys die from drowning, being bitten by snakes, and strange things happen to boys, and then we become teenagers, and more boys get stabbed to death than girls. You can just tell the story. More boys, they get shot, they die from accidents because they were driving drunk, they were speeding. Boys do all kinds of things. And then you go to prisons in South Africa, at the very least, you've got more male prisoners than female prisoners. It just happens. In the LGBTQ community, I think you've got more gays there than lesbians. It just happens. You find that it's just pure availability of men, right? And then by the time we are adults, you discover that there are just fewer men than women. But even with all the men who are there, there's the issue of viability. Some men just don't have the looks. Some don't have the style. Some can't carry a conversation with the lady. You just look at them and you feel, yeah, but I know I want someone, but I'm not that desperate. There's just issues of viability. And then you come into church and you find that there are way fewer men in church who can carry a conversation, who you can be at peace with. And so the number story is just not working out. It's just not working out. And so I always say that sometimes it's going to be difficult for ladies to get married because we just run out of stock. We just run out of stock. You are there, you are a lady, you are able, you are willing. We are run out of what? Stock. We are out of viable men. So that's the first reason why you pray for it, you fast. It's just not happening. It's not happening. That's not. But secondly, we usually struggle when it comes to the marriage front, which makes it appear as illusion because we don't always have relationship skills. There are those obvious ones that people talk about. They will say, you need to know how to communicate. Communication is important. Well, communication is fine. You use it everywhere at work. They teach you, you need to be able to be clear when you speak to other people. You must learn how to listen, and you must listen actively. You make the other person be aware that you are now listening. True, that's great. Now, the relationship scope component there is, at what point do you know that it's not worth raising this issue? Fine, you know how to communicate. But then you also need to know, you need now the wisdom to know, is this issue worth raising? I know how to have a fight. Remember, you need to know how to fight. But is this thing worth fighting over? That's a what? A relationship skill. There are certain things that I want in life and certain things I want from my relationship. That the relationship skill is, how do I determine which things to let go of and which things to hold on to? Because in life, you're not going to get everything you want. Why do I say you're not going to get everything you want? Because if you marry someone who is a sinner, that person has got their own imperfections. There are certain things you dreamt of that are never going to happen. Just forget it. But to decide what to let go of and when to let go of it, now that's a different story. That's a relationship skill. There's an issue as simple as acceptance. Acceptance is the bulk of the problems we deal with people in their first 10, 15 years of marriage is acceptance. What do I mean by that? You are this neat person. You married some disorganized, filthy piglet. Right? But you're a neat person. But you chose this person. And now that you've married them, you are hoping to make them neat. Really? You're just being unreasonable. This person was a piglet before you met them. They are going to remain a what? Until Jesus comes. They'll start being neat in the clouds when they meet Jesus. Here you are fighting, telling us, Mfundis, I've been saying the same thing 100 times. And I'm wondering, didn't you realize at 8 that he's not going to be neat? How did you get to 10, 11, 15, 20 times saying the same thing? At some point you should have realized, hey, my piglet is not going to change. Why is it still an issue? You are refusing to accept you married a what? A piglet. This is your piglet. You should love your filthy piglet because who chose it? Now that's acceptance. That's accepting Uti. I married a what? A piglet. You're like, oh, yes, piggy. Oh. This is all you marry. Now, acceptance is a relationship skill because you now have to accept that you may have had dreams that you're going to be there with your stylish husband or stylish wife, dressed to kill. And you discover that you've married someone who's into sandals and tracksuits and T-shirts that have faded colors. And you're like, what? Why can't you just? And it's like, hey, I'm fine like this. And you are just working hard to get the person to put on socks. And the next thing they put on socks with the sandals. You're like, the two don't go together. And they just, and they have no sense of the style that you have. Acceptance is to accept Uguti. All right, I have this one. And they don't see what I see. And so, if I'm going to go to a serious event, I might as well choose the outfit myself. I can't send him to go and choose it himself, or I can't send her. There are some ladies, by the way, who have zero sense of self. Zero. And the other ladies don't help when they say you look wonderful. They're not helping. They're not helping because you know the truth. But they don't know. But you just have to accept what your person is not. And whatever dreams you had, that you're going to be there, looking great together. Gone. Accept this is what you have. Now, acceptance is a powerful skill, and many people struggle with acceptance. My husband is not romantic. Was he ever? No. Then why are we having this discussion? Why are we having the discussion? You should be accepting that you married someone who's great in other areas, but is not what? That's acceptance. Now, that's a relationship skill that we usually and this is one of the reasons why people look at the whole relationship and feel this seems to be an illusion because I don't see it working. Especially when what's missing from your spouse, you can see it somewhere else. Now let me tell you a reality. Let me tell you a reality. The reality is this, and these figures, I just attach the figures for you to get the concept. So don't worry if it's 75 or 78 or 63. It's just for you to get the concept. Chances are, when you marry the person that you like, you're terribly in love with, chances are they have 75% of what you want. And the other 25% is just not there. Not there. Now, let me tell you how you sabotage your own marriage before it starts. It's hoping that after you get married, you are going to improve this 75 to 100. Once you get into your marriage with that hope, you have chosen to sabotage your own relationship. You have the 75. You're going to get married. It's going to drop. It's going to what? It's going to drop. Because now that you are living together, if I used to meet Yama and every time we met, she was on point. Now I live with her. I discover that it's a lot of work for Yama to be on point. And it's not an everyday thing for her to be. It's a lot of work. And she's just, all right? It's a lot of work. And now every day I'm like, okay, so. And now because we're now living together, there is no compulsion to be on point every day because it's not sustainable. It's not what? Sustainable. And even if I used to find her house or apartment or flat or room, whatever it is, clean whenever I came to visit, it doesn't mean she's a clean person. It simply means she made sure her space was clean when I came to visit her. And now that we live together, I discover, hey man, she sweeps once a week. And even there, it's the parts you can see. She's not moving furniture. It's the parts you can see. And now I'm discovering that now. This is why I'm saying that 75% is going to what? It's going to drop. And then you discover that whenever we were together, I would buy you stuff, go out for meals and whatever, and you feel that I like going out. Of course I like going out when it's twice a month. I do. And I don't mind paying when it's twice a month. You can't rock up here and expect us to do it twice a week. I'm like, hey. And you're like, what happened with this traditional car? I'm like, hey, let me cook. You're like, you didn't used to mind because it was twice a month and we did not live together. I mind now. And you discover, Oguti, I actually liked home-cooked food. And you wonder, since when? I always have. It's just that when we met, there was no opportunity to cook at the mall. So we bought the food. Is this making sense? Then the 75% does what? It drops. And now your new goal is to go back as close as you can to the 75% you had before you got married. Forget 76, 77. Now, do you realize how the people who are saying, I hope he's going to improve after God, do you realize that they are really messing themselves up? And now you see that there's this missing 25%. Some are trying to make sure it's there. How do we do it? You find people criticizing the missing 25% because they want it to be there. In other words, if I want you to clean, I always complain about the house being dirty. I always complain about why. I'm hoping that by complaining, you're going to improve. But what happens? The more I complain, the more you realize that means that he doesn't see the 75% that's there. She doesn't see the 75% that is there. They only see that missing 25%, and the person then says, what's the point of me doing the 75%? Because he or she doesn't see it. And so some of the things they used to do at 75, they stop doing, and your 75 drops to 60. Because they feel, what's the point? And you now start complaining about the stuff that they stopped doing because they feel, what's the point? Now, the more you complain about the missing 25%, and they just disappeared 15.
You see, now you're complaining about the 25 and the 50 that just disappeared. The more you complain, they're like, oh, they don't even appreciate the 60 that's there. It drops to 50. And there you're like, you see what? Well, you're not what I married. And they're like, drop to 40. Now you have a problem. You have a missing 60 and a reluctant 40. At that point, the relationship looks like a what? A real illusion. It's like when we told you to get married, we were selling you fake goods. But you were busy pursuing a missing 25%. That's not coming, by the way. It's not coming. Unless the Holy Spirit performs a miracle and the 75% moves to 78. Powerful miracle. A miracle equivalent to Jesus walking on water. 75 to 78. I'm trying to say, until he comes, forget about that story of a perfect person. It's not going to happen. And you must also remember, this person you want to improve. Now where you have your own missing 25. It's just that as human beings, we usually say, my missing 25 is not that big a deal. But yours, And let me tell you the funny thing about the law of attraction. Usually, if I'm a neat person, now neatness is in my 75%, I will end up being attracted to someone. Now, I'm sorry, Yama, to make. I'll be attracted to Yama, and neatness is in Yama's missing 25. What does this mean? It means when we fight about cleanliness, I wonder, Yama, what is so difficult? Why do I ask this question? Because cleanliness is in my 75, but it's in her what? 25. I do not understand why it is so difficult. And she's complaining to me about punctuality, because punctuality is in her 75, but in my 25. And you hear me saying, we can't make a big deal about punctuality and compare the two as if they're same. It's just punctuality, for heaven's sake. It's about arriving on time. It's not big deal, but cleanliness, come on. When you say that, you are usually watering down your missing 25% and making a big deal about the other person's missing 25%. Do you see how we end up sabotaging ourselves? And then people and then after a while, that 50 drops to 40, 40 drops to 30, and then someone says, this is not what I signed up for. Because as the other person drops from 75 to 60, you get fed up. Sometimes you fight back. You deliberately drop your 75 to 60 also. Because you feel, if you won't do it, I'm also not going to do certain things. And then you see there, 60 drop to 50, you drop yours intentionally. To what? To 50. Now, we are in dangerous territory in this relationship. Why? Because each one is fighting back by dropping what they were doing. And you eventually sit with them and ask, guys, if it's so bad, how did you end up together? And they're like, well, back then. And they start painting a picture of someone who's completely different than what they have now. And you wonder, but what changed? What changed is that, as you listen, someone could not stop complaining about the missing 25%. And it even got to a point where they realized, it seems as if the only thing you see when you look at me is the missing 25%. And but I appreciated the 75 that was there. How much time and effort did you put into talking about the present 75? Very little. You spent more time complaining about the what? Missing 25. And so now I changed and talked to you about your missing 25%. And we complain until we both have 10, and we decide to go our separate ways. A relationship skill is to accept, I married this one. Are they perfect? No. Now, if God has been very good to you, do you know what God does? You clean person, he gives you a piglet. But then he provides this marriage with one person who's neat. Who's that person? You don't need an oversupply of cleanliness where both of you are clean. If one is clean, the marriage has the cleanliness. What has the cleanliness? The marriage has it. You are here, you are this horrible person with money. You blow it and all of those stuff, and the Lord is good to you and gives you someone who is on the stingy side. Why? Because between the two of you, you end up with some form of balance between spending money on great things and long-term sustainability. Do you understand? So in other words, you don't need an oversupply of great financial management. If one of you can, it's fine. Are you going to fight over it? Of course you're going to fight over it. You're two human beings. You're in a sinful world. But that's what the Lord does. He gives you someone who's, if you can't keep time, the Lord blesses you with someone who's what? Who's punctual. You don't need an oversupply of punctuality. Just one is enough. Just one. One is going to make a big deal about the one. And then you run. That's how God helps us to have successful marriages in a sinful world. One of you needs it. How many people? One. You marry someone who's antisocial and you fight that this person doesn't like your friends. Is one of you social? Yes. Okay, fine. Then when people come over, guess who's the host? You. But no, I'm tired of doing it myself. If you're tired, sleep, wake up, and do it again. Why? You only need one person who's social for this thing to work. But if you accept to go to you are in this sinful world, therefore, you will not always have an oversupply of things. There are certain times when you find that the Lord has blessed both of you with the same things. Those are the things you have in common. You both love to travel and you don't even ask each other. There's no fighting here. It's a question of when, how much, and it happens. But there are instances where you have a very thin supply. You both don't want to cook. And you look at each other and you're like, you're the woman, you have to cook. And the one is like, it's 2022. Now this 2022 story is why? It's because she's lazy, because people who like to cook don't care that it's 2022. And they don't mind, they don't raise an empowerment issue. But once you feel, cooking is not my thing, you remember, by the way, who said women are the one who have to cook? Why? You're just not into it. Then you remember you've got rights. Why? Because you have a thin supply of this desire to cook. But when it's something that you do enjoy, there are people who grow up washing cars. I don't like washing cars. I don't. I have a car. I look at it. I see it more as a chore. So I usually take it to a car wash. But there are people who grow up washing their father's cars, their mother's cars, and they loved it because that's how they learned to drive, by moving the car a little bit. And they would offer to wash the car. Can I wash the car? Yes. And then they move the car, and then so they got an opportunity to drive the car by washing it, and they grew to love washing cars. Those people, they take the time to wash their car, and they just love it, and they do it. And now imagine you are the wife. You used to wash your mother or father's car at home, and then you marry someone like me who's not into that. Now I say this because my wife prefers to wash her car. Me, I'm like, baby, car wash. It's like, no, how do you find out about the scratches? I'm like, when I see it. That's how she really takes the time to do her own car, and it's like, all right. Now you marry a guy and you feel, why don't you wash the car? And I'm like, yeah, right? You grow up in the home, you work in the garden, and you see your father doing it, and you feel, yeah, that's what men do. And then you marry someone like me. I used to do the garden at home, but I did not like it. Do you know why I did not like it? It was always a chore. It's those things you're forced to do. And I told myself in my mind, when I have my own house, I'm not going to do this thing. So what do I do? Now I have my own house and I have a yard. And how do I keep the yard clean? I outsource it. I pay someone to do it. And my job is to open in the morning. I take the remote, I press, the gate opens, and he comes in. And I open that little shack that has got the garden tools. And I'm like, the story right here. But today, let's work on the leaves, the trees, and that's it. And that's it. That's what I do. And now, if you are going to be this wife who's going to think, a man should. I'm like, yeah. You either do it yourself or outsource it, as long as it's done. So, but you just need to understand that, accept this is what you married. Now you can't come for counseling because your husband won't do the yard. Why? Because he's not doing the yard. Now imagine you marry a woman who doesn't cook. There are women who don't cook. 4 sisters, she's the last. Chance of her knowing how to cook, not that high. Why? Because chances are the older sisters were doing the cooking, right? And then Yena, she was just the one who probably washed the dishes or something like that. Now you marry her, wonderful person, wonderful, great company, fun to be with, doesn't want to cook, doesn't know how to cook. Well, she does sometimes, burns them, and or puts too much salt, whatever the case may be. And that's it. When they cook the beetroot, it comes up white. You know, it happens. If you cut the beetroot before you boil it, and you boil it, the red comes out, you end up with white beetroot. I have seen it with my own eyes. If you don't believe me, try it. You're supposed to cook the beetroot whole and then cut it up later. But try cutting up before you boil it. It becomes what? I know, but never mind. Here you are with this person with a beetroot that is what? White. Are you going to fight now and come for counseling because your wife doesn't cook? No, you make a plan, especially if you are the kind of man who loves to cook. Then do what? Cook. Now you're going to say, but that's not our culture. Yeah, true. Do you know why it's not our culture? Our culture made sure that the skills they thought girls would need when they became women, they taught them when they were young. So in our culture, women cooked because they started cooking when they were girls. Men did the yard work because they started doing it when they were young. And if you grow up doing something and you love it because everyone is doing it and there's fun associated with it, you grow up as a man to do it. Some of us grow up in the cities. You grow up in a flat somewhere and it's just not there. It's not there. The father was not in the picture. He went to work in the morning, came back in the evening. This whole thing was done on weekends, if at all. And if he was an elder, he used to do church board meetings and funerals on Sunday. So you didn't see it. You didn't see it. And you marry someone who's like saying, but as a man, can't you see it needs paint? You're like, oh, paint. And then you wonder, who's going to paint it? You! Like, I'm not a painter, not a painter. So acceptance is this relationship skill that says, this is who you married. Make it work with what you have. This is the card you were dealt. This is the hand you were dealt. Make life work with this hand. And don't throw tantrums. Make it work with this hand. Now, that's a relationship skill. Now, because we don't have those relationship skills, this marriage that we constantly promote sometimes appears as an illusion. Because not only are people struggling to get married, people are struggling in those marriages. And people who leave those marriages are like, oh, finally. I went to speak at some government event program. It's a workshop. And so people were to introduce themselves. And this one lady stands up and says, I am so-and-so, so-and-so. Introduction. She says, I served my 10 years and now I am out. Served. And I'm thinking, served. And then the others are like, yeah. And I'm like, served? I asked, served as in like, no, married 10 years. I'm like, oh, served, like, yes. Now, when people say that, you wonder, how is it that if this marriage is supposed to be a blessing, someone feels happier outside than they were inside? And you know what? Sometimes it's not even that it's an illusion. You can see it. Hey, they look nicer now. What happened? And they're like, hey, I got free from that. Your God is good. It was bumpy at the beginning, but now, whew. And you're like, nah, this marriage thing, this is a fake product. This is a fake product. But the reality is that it's not a fake product. It's just that in a sinful world, something that should have been much easier has taken on a nature of difficulty. Because now, two sinful people who were raised in different cultures. I say different cultures because your home and my home are different cultures. Even if you live in the same street and both of your parents are Maswati, it's different cultures. Why? Because different families do things differently. There's an example I like to make of sheets. Some people grow up in homes where there are no sheets. There's one sheet, the bottom sheet, and the blanket or duvet or cover or comforter. And that is it. They change the sheet. That's home number one. Home number two, they have two sheets. Now, at the end of the week, the top sheet goes to the bottom, and the bottom sheet goes to the laundry, and it's washed, right? And as a result, in this home, your linen can be choice assorted. Pink sheet, pink bottom sheet, white top sheet, and stuff like that. Sometimes, so that's home number two. Huh? top, bottom, bottom, laundry, and it's washed every week. Home number 3, at the end of the week, both sheets, top and bottom, are taken out to the laundry and you put in a new set of sheets. House number 3. House number 4, you stay in those sheets until they change color. And they have some form of smell, and then you wash both of them. This is why you need jik and all of those things, so to remove color, because the sheet, the sheet is white at the edges, the parts you tuck, and brown in the middle. That's house number 4. Now, you are both Maswati who grew up in the same area, right? Both of your parents are Swazis, Maswati. Different culture. Because you get into the marriage where now Guti, as a man, you grew up in house number 3, end of the week, the set goes out, laundry, put in a new set. You marry someone coming from house number 4. The sheets stay in until they change color, right? That's a different culture. You're going to fight over those things. So the reality is this: we now live in a sinful world. 2 sinners are getting married who come from different cultures, who see the same thing differently. And these 2 people are supposed to make something that was supposed to work in a perfect world. They're supposed to make it work here in a sinful world. Man, it's a difficult one. This is where the Holy Spirit comes in. And the Holy Spirit does you a great favor by not necessarily working on your spouse, but working on you. But most prayers about, please change my spouse. Wrong prayer. Wrong prayer. Why? Because God is not in the business of forcing people. If He was, everybody would be converted already. He has chosen to stand at the door and what? And knock. The advantage when you pray, you are already standing at the door, willing to open. You might as well pray for yourself. Right? If you're praying for the spouse could be watching TV, not hearing the knock, and you are praying, oh Lord, please change my spouse. When you are at the door, so you might as well pray for the Lord to change who? You. And because we usually mess it up, even with the prayer, instead of asking the Lord to change you so that you are an easier person to live with, someone who doesn't always keep records of the missing 25%, so that you can be a pleasure to live with and this thing can be successful. You pray for the spouse, you see the fault of the spouse, and for anybody who's watching, ranging from the children to your siblings, to your cousins, to your community, to your church members, they look at this thing and they say, I see they promote it in church, but this looks like fake goods. I'm here to say today, it's not fake goods. It's not. It's a wonderful relationship that has seasons. Spring, summer, autumn, winter, but spring comes again, and then summer. Talk to anyone who's been married for a long time. They will tell you, yeah, that is true. They may not give you the details of winter, but they will say it is what? It is true. How long have the Mashwamas been married? 31 years. All right. Now that's an internal disagreement. 32. All right, don't worry. Those are normal with people who've been married. Now, in those 32 years of marriage, you've had your seasons, right? All 4 of them. They will not tell you the details of the winter. They might give you a glimpse of the autumn. But when we see them, we see spring and the what? And the summer. That's not fake goods. When they tell you these things are going to pass, they're telling the truth. It's just that they don't always want to tell you the autumn and the winter. And the reason is sometimes this, most of the time, the reason is this. We tell you our winters. You gossip about our what? Our winters. So, fine, leave our winters alone. But it's not a fake product. It is not an illusion. It is still a blessing that God created for us and our benefit. Now, does it mean that there's something fundamentally wrong with people who've given up on their marriages and walked away? No. Sometimes you just marry some Hong Kong person. But sometimes later on when you look back, you're like, yeah, he was Hong Kong, she was Hong Kong. Maybe I could have reacted differently. But those things happen later on in life. But I wanted to talk about the relationship itself and say, yes, it's there. And we still do have successful marriages. You heard, I didn't say happy, right? I said what? Successful, because of the whole season. And they come back. We still do have successful marriages. And the longer you stay in a successful marriage, the happier you are, because it improves the quality of our lives. Because let me tell you this, there comes a point when you are married where you get tired. You know what happens when you're tired? You see a fight coming from a distance. You go that way. And yeah, now you understand good what's happening. And you find that now you're getting into the space of happily married. Why? Because at this point, you can hear someone say something, and then your mind says, hey, remember, you are deaf. You are deaf. You are deaf. And you don't hear anything, and you just, serious, there are things that spouses say, and other people are shocked. Oh, did you hear? What? You're like, you, serious? Deaf. And the deafer you are, the happier you are. Why? Because you don't follow everything else. Then you realize after a while, you can have a fight, a big fight for 3 minutes. Boom, 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 boom. And then afterwards, you show the person, look, Facebook. Serious? Why? Because at some point you realize we can't be fighting, man, for a whole day. Too tired. We don't have the energy to fight the whole. Sometimes it was like, really, baby, are we really going to fight? And the other one's like, no, I don't want to fight. Yeah, let's not fight. And you just move on. And when you're still young, you feel, you just left it like that. Yeah, why? Tired. Tired. And you move into that space where you are okay. And when the other one starts throwing a tantrum, and the people are like, what are you going to do? That's how they are. Have you noticed this is a phrase people who've been married successfully for a long time? When one goes on a big thing, they're like, that's how they are. Unjalo vel. You're like, what do you mean, Unjal? They've moved into the space of happily married. They know I'm not changing this one. This is how they are. It's fine. He'll be okay. He'll be okay. She'll be okay. And she starts shouting like, you know your mother. A phrase like that, you know your mother. That's how she is. And then, that's your father. You knew. What did you expect? Now, at that point, there's no fighting, there's no silent treatment, there's no nothing. You know him, you know her. You've moved into that space now where your successful marriage is becoming a happy marriage. Why? Because there's very little conflict here, and when it comes out, it's a little flash. Like when you drop water, a drop of water in oil, it just shh. That's what happened. Shh. And then you move on. So it's not fake product. It's a great product. It's still a blessing from the Lord. Still a blessing from the Lord. So I will encourage you, when you get an opportunity to get into marriage, get into it. But invite the Holy Spirit to work on you and bless your marriage. And please, 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 just accept whoever you married. That's what you have. That's what you have. But of course, there are extreme levels of abuse we need to deal with on another day. But work on it. I wanted to come today and reassure you that it is not fake products. Still the ideal. Amen? Any questions before we pray? And any questions? Because of these lights, I'm not always able to see the hands. Because when I look this side, the glaring of so it would help to. Is there a hand here? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mfundisi. I really enjoyed that and your perspective and your point of view. I was just wondering if you would maybe give us your thoughts on this, approaching it from a single person, but knowing that society, but especially the church, has a, let's call it preoccupation, not obsession with marriage, and it feels like everything is just grooming you for marriage, and there isn't much of a focus on you as an individual growing, fulfilling your potential, being happy, being accomplished. It almost feels like the end goal is marriage, and that's the focus. Maybe your thoughts on a single person and maybe what the church could do to encourage healthy, fulfilled, single individuals who would then, I suppose, make even better marriage partners because they've been able to. I think you understand what I mean.
Single. Generally, when you look at what the church believes on paper and what people talk about the most, sometimes there's a disconnect. We do not hold the view as a church that being single is evil or less than. Why? Because by the time you get to the New Testament, the priority is salvation. This is why Paul is able to say, I wish you were like me. so that you can devote your entire time and energy and everything to spreading of the gospel. So you get there and you realize, yay, you can be viably single. In fact, it's one of the things that if you can do, it can be a tremendous blessing. I mean, if marriage was this thing that you had to do or else, then Jesus should have gotten himself a bride, you know. Even in the Old Testament, you've got guys like Jeremiah who never really got married. Daniel, we suspect, could have been a eunuch, so yeah. But by the time you get to the New Testament, you see the value of being single. So we do not hold the view that being single is either evil or being single is less than the ideal. We do not hold that view as a church. However, the people who become members of the church come from cultures. And in our cultures, we value marriage a lot. And so we don't usually encourage people to be single. From a church's perspective, we also understand that people are multifaceted. We believe as an Adventist church in the whole person. Whole person. This is why we have your health ministries, your family ministries, your stewardship. And these are not always geared towards helping you to get married. They are geared towards preparing you for life. When we talk about how you manage your finances in the stewardship department, we're gearing you for life, your faithfulness. When you talk about how you manage your time, how you manage your resources, your talents, this is a life thing. When we talk about you, how you manage your health, from the health ministry's perspective, how you can live a lifestyle that is healthy for your physical body and for your mind, that's for the life. When we talk about family ministries, we don't just talk about marriage. When we talk about marriage people, we talk about married people and we talk about singles and we talk about parenting and so on. But when we talk about singles, it's true that when we get into the married family ministry space, we don't always talk about single people as much as we talk about married people, because we are trying to speak to that ideal. Now the question is, can we talk more in the family ministry space? Can we talk more to single people about how they can be successfully single and actually label it that way and not expect you to put the dot, to connect the dots yourself? We can, but we don't do it as often, and it's one of those things we'll have to improve on, because on paper we should. Everything you read in family ministries will tell you it's a different type of, we have to address single people, not just single unmarried, we've got single divorced, single widowed, we have single never married, we have single with children, you know. We've got different types of people who are single. And so we have to minister to different types of people within the family. So on paper we should, doesn't always translate, which means that when we become family ministries leaders in our local churches, we have to be somewhat balanced. There is a real fear that even after we have helped you to live a successful life and how to be successful in your life, in choice of career, you have a great vocation, you've got a great ministry going for you, your health is on point, your relationships are fine, your stewardship is great. There's the real fear that when the sun sets on Sabbath and we've had Vespers, there is a thirst. A thirst and a loneliness you find when you come back from work during the week. And sometimes that loneliness comes in two ways. Sometimes it can be a strong sexual urge. Sometimes it can just be a desire to have company, just to walk into a house and there's somebody there. I've noticed at home that when my wife is not there and my kids are not there and I'm just alone, the house feels very empty. But when she's there, but in another room, I'm fine. In other words, she doesn't have to be here. I just need to know she's around. And sometimes it comes in that form. And because we know how difficult that can be to deal with and how that can, undealt with, it can last you for a lifetime. And we don't always want you to go through that. You will find that and it comes from a good place. The promotion for marriage comes from the fact that we know what sometimes we can be tempted to do when that thirst and loneliness kicks in. And that's some of the things that drive the promotion of marriage. Now, do we sometimes mess it up? Yes, because when I ask a young lady, when are you getting married? It's an unreasonable question. It assumes you can go to Pick and Pay and pick up a husband. It's as if you were busy and just make time to find one, you know? But the reality is that you can't just make time and get a husband. So sometimes we ask these questions as though it's within the control of the people who are supposed to answer to get married. And so I would say to people who are older, yes, the question comes from a good place, but it doesn't always land well. It puts pressure on the young women particularly, such that they can end up making choices that they know are not good for them, but just because they just want to tick this box. And sometimes they know going in. I do a lot of premarital counseling. Some people know going in that thing is shaky, and then they end up saying, we'll just have to pray for it. I'm like, no! Like, God did it before. Like, yeah, I mean, if you open the Red Sea, this is not the Red Sea. But yeah, and people just hope that it's going to happen. When it doesn't happen, they feel, well, I prayed, I tried. So yes, it can be done. It's being done now on a very low key, on a very small scale. But it can be done. The resources are there to do it. And so, yeah, local church, it can be done at the conference, we can do it at the union. We try to do it in big events, but those big events are once off, once in a while. So that emphasis has to be in the local church. And this is why, just promotion, this is why there is a 10-module family ministries leadership program. And part of that program is to prepare local church leaders to be able to minister to all kinds of people, ranging from children to single to married, divorced to widowed, the whole 9 yards. It's available, so it can be done so that our local church leaders can be more of a blessing than anything else. I was informed a while ago that our time is done. Do we have one more question or we're done? Yes, you will be the last question. Go ahead. There's a hand here, and then we will wrap up this evening.
Sanbanat Bazalwan. I have just a simple question. Sometimes when we have this kind of sessions whereby we get advice about what it means to have a godly marriage, or what it means to have a good marriage or a successful marriage. And most of the times, I can maybe say 9 out of 10, if these sessions are within church, most of those answers will include, make God your foundation. But then what does that entail particularly? Could you maybe perhaps give practical examples or certain instances or circumstances or things that maybe perhaps that you do yourself that entail and mean that you have God as your foundation?
All right. At some point, when you're married to your spouse, you are going to, the weight of their voice is going to lessen. And when they want you to do something, you will feel, right? And do what you want to do. When that time comes, I'm not saying if, I'm saying when, because it's going to happen. When that time comes, you need someone with a voice that can make you do things that you don't want to do, that you're not inclined to do. Now, some people will say, no, that person is my friend. That person is my mother. That person is my father. When we say make God your foundation, we are saying in your own personal life, make sure that God has authority on you. So that when you open the Bible and your spouse has hurt you, and God says, love keeps no record of wrongs. Of course, you don't want to hear that from your spouse who has hurt you. You don't want to hear it from his friends or his family. Sometimes you may not want to hear it from your parents who are trying to make sure that they are not embarrassed by their child's marriage who collapses. But when you hear it from the Lord and He has authority in your life, you are more inclined to order your life in that direction. When the same God is going to say love is kind, and He has authority, He forces you to say kind things when you don't feel like being kind. Now, at that point, God is able to govern your marriage through you. Because He has control over you, He has control in the what? In the marriage. Now, imagine when God is able to speak to both of you and He has authority to both of you. Then He runs the what? The marriage. Now, it's not just about going to church or having a position in church. It's that when you open the Bible and the Lord speaks, you feel fine. Once you are there, that's your foundation. Your foundation is not romance. Your foundation is not their looks. Your looks are going to change as a young lady, right? You're going to, not all of them, but some have kids and then, and others have kids and things are okay. And most of those times it's genetic. Sometimes people, it's just going to happen and you force them to go to the gym, you make them miserable. But when your foundation is not their looks, their success, their position, where they come from, their charm, but God allows you to look at your spouse who's not as attractive as they were when you married them and tell you to love them, to be faithful to them. When they are surrounded by people who are 10 times more attractive, that voice says, be faithful to this one. And you're like, fine, let's make a best with this one. You love the one you're with, and the Lord tells you, that's it. Find joy in the wife of your youth. You're like, but there are other youth. It's like, yeah, this one. So that's what it means. Hope that's helpful.